Muito obrigada, Gui, Rafa, e a todos que estão acompanhando o nosso Liga Open Innovation Summit. Meu nome é Luciana Leão, sou gerente de marketing na Liga e serei a mediadora desse painel sobre o pós-pandemia das startups no Brasil e na América Latina. Lembrando que esse painel será em inglês, com tradução simultânea em português. O conteúdo com áudio original está sendo gravado e estará disponível para vocês na nossa plataforma e também no nosso canal do YouTube. Thank you so much, Irene and André, for joining us on this panel today. I kindly ask you to briefly introduce yourselves to our audience, please.
Obrigada, Luciana. Gusto verte otra vez, Andrés. My name is Irene Arias. I'm in charge of the Innovation Lab of the Inter-American Development Bank Group. IDB Lab has been around for 27 years. We used to be called Multilateral Investment Fund. Basically our job within the Inter-American Development Bank Group, it's to promote innovation and to be this experimentation space. We can use many instruments of financing, of knowledge and connections, and we support the entrepreneur along its journey. So from very early stages all the way to Series B. Very happy to be here. We have partnerships with many entities in Brazil, and it's obviously an amazing country that's given us a lot of great examples in the past years. And IDB Lab was involved in the creation of the venture capital industry in Brazil since the beginning. So very happy to be here with you.
Hi, my name is Andre. Yeah. My name is Andre. I am an expert partner here at Bain Company. I lead what we call internally Bain Innovation Exchange, which is a global business unit within Bain Company. And basically we sit in between our traditional Bain corporate clients and all this world of innovation and all this ecosystem. So we have been living and breathing this story that you guys have been sharing in this event with our clients on a daily basis. So it's super engaging to be joining the event. I've been working consulting most of my career, and now I'm an expert in innovation and digital transformation for our corporate clients. Our group is based in San Francisco, but we have people all around the globe in the major innovation hubs of the world, working with our corporate clients and innovation ecosystem. It's a pleasure to be here with Irene and you, Luciana.
Thank you so much and welcome. So to get started, Irene, the pandemic scenario was responsible not only for creating new businesses, but mainly for accelerating the adoption of existing businesses and innovations. In this context, the partnership between private sectors, governments, and startups became a priority. Do you believe that we will keep this importance on the agendas from now on? Do we now have a greater clarity and practical evidence that open innovation can deliver many values?
Thank you, Luciana. It is a great question, and I do hope so. I think it's up to all of us to make sure that happens, that everything that we've seen accelerating in the past few months that is good in terms of creating more sustainable growth that is also digitally inclusive, continues. And I think there are lots of lessons from the health sector where typically startups, corporates, and the government had not partnered in such a way before. And now we have an abundance of examples that really can lead the way for other verticals like education and others where digital solutions are going to become predominant for at least a hybrid future system of education and in other services. And for sure in banking it was already happening, but in sectors that were lagging behind, it's up to us to make sure that we continue to be these brokers so that this happens. Part of what the experience that we had in the past few months doing this was when we first started the pandemic and launched the call for innovative ideas across the innovation ecosystem in Latin America and the Caribbean. And within a couple of weeks, we had 500 ideas. We curated them, top 20 are already in operation. And most of them are first-time collaborations between startups, corporates, and governments. For example, Inspiramed in Colombia, they put together capabilities from two entrepreneurs, two corporates, Ruta N, the ministry, and developed a prototype for a mechanical ventilator that is also open source, so it can be replicated. It really follows all the sort of digital development principles, and there are many other examples like that, of course, including in Brazil, where you had companies like Inloco basically using their capabilities of geospatial tracking for managing the pandemic. And I think now is going to continue to pursue and enhance those capabilities in other fields, including with corporates, in particular with e-commerce platforms. So I think it's a great opportunity for all, and I do hope that we continue to move in this direction.
Andrea, do you share the same point of view?
I agree 100%. I think that things are only get, if not faster and more intensive than what happened in the past 6 or 8 months. From our point of view, that we're working a lot with corporate companies, it's very interesting to see the journey that the companies went through, like since COVID started in February, March, when people realized that this was different than anything else in the past. What we saw working with our corporate clients was basically the most advanced innovators doubling down on innovation, and they saying, hey, this is the time to actually change my business model. This is the time to find new ways of growth, to serve my clients better. At the same time, we saw the companies that were starting their innovation saying, I need to protect my business, and cutting costs and cutting innovation investment. And fast forwarding 6 months, 7 months now, we see those companies that cut cost on innovation and focusing only on their core and survival struggling, right? So we see that the companies that went well in this journey are the companies that were able to, faster react to this market and actually, understand what the opportunities are for growth and for doing things differently. So what we are seeing now, and it's funny because I had 19 or 20 different conversations with Brazilian corporates in the past couple weeks only, and everyone now is trying to figure out how to solve this this magic of working with open innovation and working with the ecosystem. Now everyone realized how important this is. So my answer is 100%. This is going to only accelerate.
And Luciana, maybe just to add also and Andre, when we were preparing for this, explain to me a little more the model of Bain Innovation Exchange, and I think it's great. It's something that's going to definitely help corporates be able to actually do it, speak the language of startups, and know how to integrate. And I think it's really good for both sides, partly because in terms of the startup ecosystem, we've seen that, of course, the first 6 months have had a big impact, right? I mean, 41% of startups globally have less than 3 months of runway, almost 3/4 saw a decrease in sales. And so the impact has been heavy. Of course, in digital or tech-based startups, it's a lot less, but still. And there have been some good developments, like, for example, the recent sale of or JV of Corner Shop in Mexico. It was one of our investee companies, or D-Local, the latest and 20th unicorn of Latin America and the Caribbean from Uruguay, a digital payment company. So while for some of these startups, it's been great times and they've catched on this opportunity, others are struggling. And I think the best we can do is to open up this connection with corporates that can open for them the market. And corporates need them because, as Andres, you said, I mean, it is almost like a survival thing now, and I think most of them see it. The final point I wanted to make is that also to make sure that this happens and continues at an accelerated pace without becoming a situation where we exclude part of the society, we need to make sure that certain building blocks and digital infrastructure is in place. And some of the institutions like the IDB or DFC and others, in terms of organizations like us, are directing resources to helping build that infrastructure, connectivity, etc. because the only risk that I see in this accelerated trend is that if we don't do it right and think about connectivity for all, it could lead into a much more a much deeper digital divide. In some ways, it's very easy to innovate for the few percent that is well connected and has good resources. It's much more difficult to innovate for the rest, but we need to make sure that it's inclusive.
Perfect, Irene. And thinking about the post-pandemic, the importance of developing and investing in new technologies became even more evident. So, Andre, how can we consolidate this importance in the development agenda of Latin American countries and also in the agenda of the strategy of companies?
Yeah, so technology and hard sciences, deep tech, all of this have been cheaper and more accessible than ever, right? So you see, like, companies don't need a lot of investment now with, computing power, how it has developed, and cloud computing and all the technology available to startups today. It's cheaper and more accessible than ever. So in any company that doesn't adopt this, it's going to be fated to lag behind. So only if you look like I was watching some of like the pitches before the session, and you see like the technology, artificial intelligence, biomechanics, or a lot of new tech and new science being applied to those startups that Porto Seguro and Oxygenio have been working. And if you look, only one sector like agriculture, which was a sector that was not covered here, at least in the hour before, you can see stuff happening in San Francisco on autonomous and indoor farming. You see Shanghai, people doing facial recognition in cattle, pigs, and you've seen São Paulo companies using artificial intelligence to bypass guesswork of farmers, etc. I think the biggest point here on tech is that the regional places in like Latin America, people will need to figure out what is the advantage that they have, right? And in nowadays where technology has been so well developed, the advantage is around data, is around the customers you have, the companies that you have. So we are one of like the biggest agricultural producers. We have lots of data, right? So any field in Brazil can, produce a lot more data than, many other places in the world. How we can monetize that, how we can create tech that will actually create us a advantage that we're not going to be able to develop this anywhere else in the world. We can't compete with China in artificial intelligence. We can't compete with some of the stuff that is happening in San Francisco with the capital that is flowing there. So what are the places where those startups that are watching us and the companies that are watching us, that they should invest in tech, because tech is a cheap investment nowadays. It's just finding what is our advantage here in each one of the vectors that those companies work.
Yeah, I think we're seeing similar trends. I think there is also, again, thinking about what could accelerate it and what could make the cost of adoption much lower. So if we think about blockchain, or IoT is much more widespread and so on, but in AI, many companies claim they have AI models. In reality, it takes a lot longer to build them than what they probably have built. And so I think there is there was, at least at the beginning, a bit more hype than reality there, but there is huge potential, as Andres said, and I think it is more and more at the fingertips of companies to be able to use it. But there are certain things that we can do to increase adoption. A couple of examples are on blockchain. We have built LACchain. LACchain, it's the global alliance for blockchain in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's really that highway. It's a publicly permission net that is freely available for anybody to put their use cases on. So it does completely, it's like the new internet, but the internet of value, right? So on top of it, we'll build the self-sovereign identity and also the cross-currency payment capabilities. I think just lowering the friction around building that individually by each company and just making it available for all in a way that is also agnostic to the technology providers it's a great advantage, and that's partly the role that we're trying to sort of play in the region. So anyone interested is super welcome to reach to us. The second is to because as Andre you said, a lot of it is around data. I think having good data governance is critical, and making sure that we pursue these new models that are AI driven with a lens of responsible use of AI. And so we launched an initiative called FAIR. We're looking at basically creating very basic, easy to use tools for self-evaluation of how is my use of AI, how is my use of data, and not just data privacy, but also, you know, ensuring that there are no algorithmic biases and so on. So I think those are important considerations for anyone that's looking to go deeper into this. And we're trying to ensure that we create that sort of basis to make it easier to adopt these technologies.
Great. And from your point of view, Irene, how can the Latin American markets follow an innovation agenda that helps countries to establish economic recovery at this point? We cannot hear you. You are on the mute.
Oh, yep. Phrase of the day, I suppose. So the first one is to cushion the drop in income that a lot of founders have felt. In that sense, we started by the companies in our own portfolio with a liquidity line to expand that runway for those companies that really have a lot of promise, but they had difficulties fundraising during this period. The second is, as I mentioned, generate demand, opening up markets. So I think the collaborations that, for example, Andre from Bain is promoting in terms of connecting more startups with corporate, it's fantastic. It probably will go a longer way in terms of validating the products of the startups than even a financing line. So generating that demand, opening markets. Also, third is supporting ecosystem organizations. I mean, we work with many of them in Brazil and other parts of the region. We even have office space in Cuba, where we hope to get back soon. And finally, it's also taking advantage of the capacities of each of us. So not trying to all do it by ourselves, but really opening up bridges so that we put at the service of like this, we know what our capabilities are, and we work with others. And I've seen huge desire and willingness from a lot of corporates to collaborate, much more than before. Just with a few phone calls, I mean, we managed to put together a program that and be part of a program that was co-led by many corporates called Restarting Together. Part of it was selecting startups that came up with excellent solutions for the restarting of the economy. And so I think doing that would be you doing more of that, and just back to your question at the beginning, making sure that this is not just during these months, that this is something that lasts is super important.
Andrea, do you want to share with us your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think the combination of corporate, government, and non-profit organizations with this startup is what is going to bring what's going to bring value to to the whole. I don't think in isolation. So innovation doesn't happen ever in isolation, right? So it's impossible to do innovation in a vacuum. And I thought it was super interesting that you guys are bringing on the pitch just before this session on Porto Seguro and also the startups, and they speaking about how those two worlds are helping each other. I think if we had 100 others like this, we do have a lot of programs, right? In Brazil, we don't have a lot of effective programs. I think if we had 100 of those effective programs, that would, help a lot. Not only the startups, the founders, the entrepreneurs, but also the companies themselves and the development of the country.
And look at the examples that have emerged and see how they apply to other verticals. In Brazil, for example, one of the programs that we have supported is a IDEA, and it's an open innovation program. It's using Hospital das Clínicas and IPT facilities and teams to validate new health solutions. And they already know if it's successful, how it would be integrated into the public health system. So you reduce also the risk of those good solutions scaling up, because you've already kind of designed the path to scale from the beginning. Or also, in terms of biotech, because Andre, you were talking about agri-tech and biotech earlier. There are great partnerships already that we should see in many other parts of the region. CITES in Argentina, for example, which has the support of Sancor. A lot of great startups are coming out of there, it's a bit more patient capital, but it's really a great example of corporates getting into and connecting with the startup world.
And how can different actors in Latin America and Caribbean's entrepreneurship ecosystems work in a network to strengthen these regional collaboration to surpass challenges imposed by pandemic, Irene?
Well, one of the things that we've seen is that despite the challenges, there are also some advantages for ecosystems that are emerging that we've seen. We all know that we have like a VC industry of it was close to reaching the $5 billion mark last year. But most of that activity was in 5 countries in the region, and most of that activity was in Sao Paulo. And so now I think a lot of what we're seeing is a decentralization of that with the connection. Most of our ecosystem partners, for example, Scala, that works with angel investors, they've pivoted their model, and instead of just reaching those that could attend their networks in the specific cities, they opened up the Venture Academy, and this is online, much more accessible to everybody. So there's a lot of content and networking opportunities that are emerging that are facilitating how entrepreneurs or founders in smaller cities get access to capital, to networks, to markets, etc. It's not easy. I think there is also a lot of proactive role that we can play from, let's say, Bain or from our side in also referring one to another, because obviously people cannot meet in person. So we've done that a lot. Investors that want to invest in startups, and we can act as a sort of referral, or institutional investors that want to invest in funds. We did that recently between IFC and Pomona, a fund in Central America. And so I think it's, we need to, I would just encourage taking advantage of at least those benefits that we have seen in terms of interconnection, given that lots of things have moved to digital channels.
Great. And Andrea, Bain Company and Bain Innovation Exchange monitor the strategic movements of large companies in terms of innovation. Recently, you released a report which compares the innovation approach used in Brazil versus other countries like US. What we see is a polarization in adopting specific innovation approaches. The pandemic and the rapid response of some innovators during this period means what for this dynamic?
Yeah, so you're right. What we published beginning of this year was a study that we did globally with 1,200 innovation executives and 120 in Brazil. And what we found out is that 80% of the the corporates in Brazil, 80%, were still in the early days in their innovation journey compared to 25 in the US. Only 3% were more advanced compared to 26, 27 in the US. So it was a huge gap. And when we do this, we measure, do you have a strategy? Do you know why you're doing this? Is there a top-down mandate for innovation? Do you have the funds? Are you committed in doing this? Do you have the approaches to do that, right? So not only open innovation, but also investment, also your internal teams working in agile, are also you incubating new ideas internally. So all of this and your ways of working, right? So do you compensate people that make mistakes in the sake of entrepreneurship, internal entrepreneurship, innovation, etc.? So all of this showed to us that there is a long road ahead for Brazilian corporate companies. Fast forwarding 7 or 8 months, what we are having conversations with clients, this changed a lot, and a lot of people started their new programs, started to invest a lot in innovation, as I mentioned before. So I assume this gap, is starting to close. But one thing that was super interesting was that companies in Brazil were doing more open innovation actually than companies outside of Brazil. If I'm not wrong, 46% of companies in Brazil said they are doing some sort of like open innovation versus 44 outside. So they're not developed, but they're trying to do open innovation. And this is interesting. We see a lot of programs happening. What we don't see yet is a lot of results. As I mentioned, I think this what you guys showed with Porto Seguro is super interesting, but there are not many programs that are still like creating actual results because you don't have the engines, you don't have the hardware inside to make this open innovation translate into results. And now the companies are realizing this, and they want to set up their organization to think like a startup, to act together with startups, to partner when they need to partner. And that's the 19 or 20 companies that I talked to only in the last couple of weeks were along those lines. Those companies are trying to figure out how to do that. So answering your question, this is accelerating, and I'm eager to run this study again end of this year or beginning of next year to see how this changed. But I'm feeling on a daily basis that this has evolved a lot.
You're looking forward to this new report as well.
Yes.
So to conclude and not let's conversation here, I'd like to ask for both of you 2 recommendations of readings for executives and also entrepreneurs who seek to expand their references about open innovation.
I will be a little bit selfish here, so I will say read our study. It's called Navigating Your Route to Innovation. It's part of like a paper we published it last year, and then I updated this for Brazil beginning of this year, so I recommend this reading. And if you're interested, also there is a website called explore.bain.com where we have very quick self-assessment that companies can go there and see how they are in their maturity level of innovation. And if they're interested in seeing cases, I love the John Deere case from the corporate side and also from the startup side, how they are evolving and digitally transforming from a tractor company to a technology company. So if you want to learn more or discuss anything, I am available on any of those topics.
I'll read those, Andre, for sure. I'll go with the Innovator's Dilemma. This is Professor Clayton Christensen's book. We work still a lot with the Institute and with Fosa Ojomo, who's leading now, and who wrote with Christensen after Prosperity Paradox. And basically it's a classic piece, but I think it has a lot of great lessons about the need for corporates to create different structures for disruptive innovation, and it does dissect a lot what's incremental innovation versus disruptive innovation. And I think it's those corporates that are not afraid of disrupting their own business that are probably going to leapfrog faster, and that will have an easier time getting a new mindset in the organization around innovation, so that that's one. The other one I would say it's much more general, but I found it really useful. It's Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss. And it just has lots of quotes from many corporate leaders and other leaders that are, you know, really easy really useful when you are going through a process of transformation. And I just close by saying it is much more of a mindset and a cultural process than it is about just adopting a new, you know, digitizing some sort of process or something like that. So I think it goes much deeper if you really want to get the full advantage. And we are doing it at IDB Lab itself. You know, we're 100 people. Half of us are in Washington, D.C., but the rest are in all of the 26 countries. We were very decentralized before. This whole process of the pandemic has made us much more interconnected and horizontal. And so it's been this period, a way of accelerating a distributed leadership culture that makes it a lot easier for self-initiative to flourish. And that's just as I think, Andre, you mentioned at the beginning, of innovation being, you know, it's a constant process of being curious and being able to tap into mixing different ideas and disciplines. So those would be my two recommendations, but I'll also obviously invite anyone interested. We have a program called Next Ventures, and it's precisely designed to make easier corporates and startups to work together. And I look forward, of course, to working jointly with you, Andrea, and on some of the cases in the future.
Great recommendations. On behalf of Liga Ventures, I'd like to thank you once more, Irene and Andrea, for this great conversation.